Hello, Joy Horner here. Thoughtful Thursdays. As usual, I haven't really thought out this one. It's going to be spontaneous and off the cuff as usual. I'm not in my bedroom, which is usually the quietest place to do these things. I'm in my husband's office. As you can see, there's this most beautiful ancient Stonehenge poster behind me. Yeah, when there used to be free festivals at Stonehenge, and yeah, my husband used to go, I didn't. I was far too straight. So today's Thoughtful Thursday, and again it's normally sparked by something that's happened in my pregnancy group. Yeah. Okay, so many things were discussed this week, it's really hard to pick one topic. But the one thing that came to my mind was preparing for birth, how to prepare for birth, and how to prepare for the best birth possible. So this is advice for mothers to be, fathers to be, transgender people to be, parents. I really try and use appropriate language. It's hard for someone of my age, but I'm getting there. I want to include everyone. Yeah, lesbian parents, gay parents, queer parents, transgender parents, any parents. Surrogate parents, yeah, all. All are included in this broadcast. Probably more that I haven't mentioned. Yeah, so the idea of birth preparation is really, really important. You know, knowledge is power. And unless we know what our choices are, you know, we're not going to make valid, informed choices. And yes, our wonderful midwives and doctors can give us a choice, but sometimes they're giving us a choice from a very limited menu. And what if you want something that isn't on the menu? If you went to a restaurant and you fancied I don't know, big nice green salad, but you found all they did was pie, chips and peas, you know, you'd probably take your custom elsewhere, wouldn't you? You want a nice juicy salad, and it's not on the menu, so you're not going to go there. Unfortunately, lots of people choose to birth in hospital now when there's no actual medical need to birth in hospital unless there's a problem. And I'm afraid what the hospital offers sometimes is a very limited menu. You may get a slightly different menu if you go to a birth centre. If you're at home, you write the menu. So you decide what's allowable and what's not, and what you can and can't do. You know, there should be no telling you that you can't get in the birth pool yet, or you, I don't know, aren't ready to push yet, or you know, you shouldn't be using your TENS machine or whatever. Do you know what? It's your house, you're an adult, you can do exactly what you want. Now this translates to the hospital too. So although there might be a limited menu, you can still choose what you accept and what you don't. So if you don't like pie, chips and peas, but the chips and peas might be okay, you know, you don't have to have pie. No one's going to force you to have pie. It can be repeatedly suggested that you have pie, and how lovely pie is. Now let's assume pie is an epidural and you're in a lot of discomfort. Your baby might be in an unusual position. Your body's working extra hard to overcome that obstruction. And sometimes it's a struggle. It's a real struggle to be able to deal with those strong sensations. And sometimes epidurals are necessary. You know, I've had one. I'm not anti-epidural. I had a brow presenting baby augmented with syntocinon. So yeah, I needed that damned epidural. But in a normally progressing labour with a baby in a good position, if I don't want epidural or pie, I don't want the waitress standing over me saying, but the pie's really good. You know, I know how hungry you are. Wouldn't you just like some pie? You know, because eventually if you are hungry, or in pain in case of an epidural, you might well give in and take that option. Now, the staff are being kind, they are wanting to relieve your discomfort. But unless you've done your research, unless you know all about epidurals and the cascade of interventions that can come with them and after them, and the effects on you and your baby, you wouldn't really want to be choosing that option unless you thought it all through. Sorry, I realise I ate some cashew nuts and a couple still in my teeth. Please excuse me. So, the choice is always yours, but bear in mind there is more choice at home. So if your pregnancy has been straightforward, if your labour is straightforward, if your baby's in a good position, you should be able to manage at home and do whatever the hell you want. Give birth in your garden, give birth in your living room, in a birth pool, in your bath, in front of your log burning stove, locked in your bathroom with your midwife outside. Occasionally happens, babies come real quick when we're not expecting it. Yeah, you can do what the hell you like. Bit harder when you're in a birth centre or in a hospital. Still get lovely staff, might even get the same set of midwives, but it's someone else's property. And if you can imagine, if you go to even a good friend's house, and you need to use the loo, even if you know where it is and you've used it lots of times before, you'll ask to use the loo, won't you? Or most polite people will. I like to think. So, is it alright if I use your loo? Can I use the loo? You're asking permission, to actually have a wee, which is a basic bodily function that, we've got every right to do. But because you're on someone else's property and you're using their facilities, you do ask. So there's the difference. There's the power shift. On your home, in your home, you decide what you do, what you don't do. People have to ask you politely if they can use the toilet. And if they could possibly put a light on or not. If you're on someone else's property, you have to ask permission to do these things, which is okay, and people are polite and people are accommodating. But you see the subtle difference? On your property, you're the boss, and most people then feel more empowered in their choices over birth and feel more able to say, or not even say, just do what they need to do in a private environment that's their own. They can do what the hell they like. They usually do what the hell they like in their own home. Whereas on someone else's property, there's sometimes a feeling we need to be better behaved, and yeah, it's just a subtle difference in the dynamic. So do consider this when you're planning place of birth. There was a big study out a couple of years ago, I think it's called the Birthplace Study, which shows giving birth at home or in a midwife-led centre is as safe, if not safer, for mums and babies than going to a big obstetric unit if you've had a baby before, your pregnancy's been straightforward, you've got one baby in a head-down position and you go into labour at full term, which is a lot of women. If it's your first baby, it's thought being near an obstetric unit would be a good idea, because sometimes these babies need helping out a bit more often than when people have had babies before. You're just more likely to have an assisted birth if it's your first baby than if it's not. So there's a slight difference there, but it's really small numbers, and it's really minor. So do your homework, do consider place of birth, consider where you'd feel most relaxed and most loved and most able to let go. A lot of us I mean, not me particularly, but members of my family perhaps, have problems letting go. As in, if you go to a festival, Stonehenge, umpteen years ago, late 70s probably, they probably didn't even have toilets, who knows. But if you go to one of the modern festivals, although they've got toilet facilities, they're not always the most cleanly, and one is reluctant to actually sit on a seat, and you get very good at squatting and hovering and things. But the body's very clever and doesn't let go unless it actually feels safe to do so. There's the privacy issue as well. You can hear everyone around the portaloo or the stalls that you're in. It could be quite off-putting. The body is a complex system of biological functions, and the letting go of birthing is not at all dissimilar to the letting go on the toilet. So if you're the type of person who has problems letting go on a public toilet, or even at a friend's house on the toilet, and can only go on your own toilet, I'd really consider giving birth at home. Otherwise you're going to find it hard letting your baby out in such a public facility. The rooms are private, but you can hear people walking by. There is a door, people can come in. You can hear the people in the next room sometimes. Anyway, waffled for far too long today, and this wasn't at all what I thought I'd be talking about. Funny how it happens. But yeah, hope you enjoy it, and see you next week for Thoughtful Thursdays. Bye!